All right, everybody, SK Lifestyle. As you know, I'm just going to jump right into it. Spa is one of my favorite tracks on the calendar for F1. Obviously, today was the Spa GP in Belgium, and what a race it was, right? But as we all know, the one thing that kind of really just kind of mired in controversy was the split strategy in Mercedes. Now, if you watched the race, you saw that Lewis Hamilton was leading the race since I think lap 3 or 4. You know, he beat out Perez right out on lap 1, got ahead of Leclerc, and just kind of took it from there. Now, the thing with Mercedes is they typically keep the same strategy. So Hamilton was covering off the rest of the lineup. You know, Piastri, Leclerc, Norris, Verstappen, and of course Russell as well, because assuming that everybody's just going to do the second pit stop. Now, what happened was, one thing I want to cut in real quick, I don't know who was commenting, but right at the end, they were like, well, this is one of the greatest drives for the history books and da-da-da-da-da. You know, Russell did win fair and square. We'll get to that, you know, beyond everything else that kind of transpired afterwards. But, you know, leave it to Mercedes' strategy aside, he won, okay? He did finish the race in first and all that. But it wasn't the craziest drive that we've ever seen in our life. I mean, think of all the times we witnessed Vettel, Alonso, Verstappen, Hamilton, Weber, Button. I could just go on and on. Schumacher, everybody. Even other races of Russell's, it was just unnecessary. It was almost like, trying to hype it up even more than it already was. But back to the story. So they split strategies, and really Russell benefited from being on the Mercedes team because the whole idea was that everybody was going to double pit. Once Hamilton went ahead and did that for the team to make sure that he had the tire advantage against everybody else that was there, it was only under the assumption that Russell was going to do the same because, mind you, Hamilton was not complaining about the tires. If anything, he said they were okay in the first stint. Once they pitted the first time, right before he went to pit the second time, he was like, man, tires feel great. So, of course, he extracted all the potential he could out of them on that in-lap. On that in-lap. But he could have easily done a one-stop as well if that's the way the Mercedes team wanted to go with it. Now, mind you, he was ahead, then it was Piastri, then it was Russell right behind him. So, if they were going to do that, Hamilton likely would have certainly won the race, and Russell would have probably gotten P3. Maybe he could have battled Piastri, but Piastri had pace all the way up until the end, and we saw the way he closed the gap from 5 seconds down to almost 1. So, it was like 1.5 or whatever. So, Russell benefited from knowing what his teammate was going to do and making sure that he had everybody else covered off, and then just had not much to lose if you didn't care about getting on the podium or not. And so that's really where he gained from it. Now, I was clearly upset. Now, you could see Hamilton, always the reserved guy, when he was getting interviewed post-race, congrats to Russell and all this and that. But in the cool-down room, emotions can't lie. And we saw there was not much talking going on. There was not even many looks over towards Russell. And then, the champagne spraying and everything afterwards. Of course, they hoisted up the engineer and stuff, Again, Hamilton's a team player, happy for Mercedes getting the 1-2, but wasn't really that excited about it. Now, the other thing to really spoke volumes was Toto Wolff. When we saw him right as the race finished and we saw the 1-2 happen, Toto Wolff was like this. There was no excitement. There was none of the, oh yeah. We know what Toto does. There was none of that. Then, what really shocked me was when it was time to spray the champagne, when the anthem is being, played out and everything. Toto was in the garage in one of like little, carbon fiber chairs or whatever it is, and he's on the phone, like FaceTiming or something. He was more excited to be doing that. Now, so that's what brings me into all of this. One thing that I think, now, of course, we'll start to get details as things roll out and so forth, but if I'm just going to, my own kind of conjecture here is that there was a split in Mercedes. The idea to allow them to split the strategy wasn't from the top down. I think some people on Russell's garage just decided to do it out of whim, while Russell wanted to do it on his own. And Russell knew what he was doing and what he was trying to take on at that point. And of course, again, they only benefited from knowing what the other side of the garage was doing, where they were on the race, and what they were doing to cover off the rest of the people. So I think Toto wasn't that happy with the fact that Hamilton pretty much got cut out of the win. Now you could say, well, he could have got it on track. That's true. But they also don't want to battle them that hard. When it came down to lap 42, you heard on the radio, they were like, oh, let's play it fair or whatever, give each other space. Hamilton could have just sent it. If this was Rosberg Hamilton, if this was Verstappen Hamilton, he could have just went for it. He had so much more tire advantage. He could have just pushed Russell and then just ran off with it. You know what I mean? And he didn't. And it was just very tough. Now, the other thing that I want to say is, and I think some of it has already come out, that the FIA basically called out Russell's car, I believe, on the length, but also the weight. Now, I still need to follow up a little bit on the length. And now I just ended up finishing this video, or finishing this race, and coming right out here. So obviously facts are still unfolding. So if it's the length piece, then that is right there. That's just one nicks against him, and you're already done. The weight piece, I will say, is kind of twofold. To me, if you were pushing that hard, now mind you, in the middle of the race, we heard Verstappen asking, "Hey, do you think I can push a little bit more?" He wanted to catch up to Norris. He wanted to take the race to him. One part of it is you don't want to keep going over a Rouge and or into Raidillon and just killing your plank underneath. You know what I mean? Especially if you're carrying so much more speed. So if you're doing that, you're going to be taking out some of the plank, which obviously you need a certain amount of it to be able to have the car qualify and be acceptable. But also, as you're wearing it down, you're shaving stuff off, which means you're shaving off weight. Number two is, I also want to say, if he was pushing so much harder, he was likely using up a lot more fuel that they didn't really plan on. And maybe that's also where Toto was kind of being a little PO'd, because then he's sitting there thinking, like, this was never in the game plan. And even if you were going to extend, not to extend and push that hard that you're going to race your teammate for the last 6 laps flat out. I mean, we saw the gap coming down to 0.3 and going back up to 0.8. You can't do that without redlining in 8th gear, you know what I mean, going through, and fine, do whatever you want. But again, the length piece set aside, you're likely burning up more fuel than you planned for, killing the weight. And then also, again, with the plank, who knows, that could have added on to it as well. And we're not talking about large margins. We're talking about 1.5 kilograms, which is, I don't know, conversion to pounds is like 4 pounds or something like that. You know what I mean? Whatever. You could put it up on the screen or put it in the comments, all that kind of stuff. But it's not that much. You know what I mean? But we all know a gallon of gas, depending on what kind of fuel and all, but a gallon of gas is probably like 8 pounds or something. You know what I mean? So you're talking about you burning up an extra half a gallon maybe of fuel that you didn't, or a quarter of a gallon. I mean, again, depending on what the fuel is like that they burn and how much it weighs. I don't really remember all those measurements off the top of my head, but I just wanted to come out here and talk about it because I was pretty upset for Hamilton. I wanted him to get another win. He deserved it. The way he ran this race, just stellar. That was a drive to remember, the way he carried on through this. The Russell thing, he drove well, but it wasn't something that was exceptional. He utilized the situation at hand. Now, it's okay if you want to split a strategy if Russell was in like P11 and there's not much to gain other than to just go long and hope you can get a couple of points. You're not really affecting your other side of the garage, and what are you going to lose, right? Same thing if you're maybe P8 and you want to get to P6 or something. All right, sure. Hamilton's at the lead. Split the strategy. See what you can do, Russell. Bring it on home for the team. But when you're talking about him doing all the work against Piastri and everybody else, Leclerc, and then you're just going to slide through and then just take the advantage of all that, and then also the advantage of knowing your teammate can't race you as hard as anybody else, and you have the same engine and all that, it just was not that impressive. And yeah, but I mean, what kind of karma? And it really sucks for Mercedes because, yeah, they may not be looking at any kind of driver's championship, but the constructors is still on. It is still on for how far they can get, like a P2 or something. P3 at least. I think they're P4 right now. So it all makes a difference. And now instead of getting, the 18 points and the 15 points, they got the 25 points and nothing. So Mercedes definitely lost out. Again, I still want to follow up because even with all the strategy talk and everything, like I just said, if somehow his car was over length, then, he would have been out. And so it's somewhat of a moot point. But to push it and all like they did, it just wasn't expected. And I'm very interested to see in the coming days, especially we're now into the summer break. So there's nothing to do, especially for media, but to just circle like vultures and just figure out what's happening, what's going on, stir up the drama. Netflix is in full swing, all of that. So it's going to be interesting. So I'm going to cut it off here. This is probably a lot longer than I even expected it to be. But man, what a race. And again, Spa is one of my favorite tracks of the year. Top 3 for sure. It is just an F1 track through and through. I absolutely love it. Today did not disappoint. And man, one for the record books and another one for LH. That boy right there, 44. So leave it in the comment section down below. SK Lifestyle, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. See y'all next time.